When you sit down at like a traditional restaurant, there's this very specific, deeply ingrained expectation of physical craftsmanship. You picture a chef, a wooden cutting board, the quiet ambiance.
Right, it feels very human, very analog.
Exactly. But then you zoom out and look at the modern conveyor belt sushi industry, and I mean, that romantic analog image is entirely shattered.
Oh, completely. You're looking at a landscape today that feels, well, it's closer to a semiconductor clean room than a traditional kitchen.
And that is exactly where we're starting today. Welcome to this deep dive on the Japan Stock Podcast. Today, we're looking at a massive stack of recent filings and the FY26 strategic blueprints for food and life companies, trading under ticker 3563.
Right, and if you live in Japan or follow Asian markets at all, you already know them as the powerhouse parent company behind Sushiro, Kyotaru, and Sugidama.
Yeah, but before we start pulling apart these balance sheets, we need to establish some ground rules for our analysis today.
For sure. We are strictly applying an 80-20 focus to these materials. That means we are not going to waste your time today debating the merits of their latest seasonal tuna campaign or minor administrative reshuffling.
Which I think we can all appreciate. We want the signal, not the noise, right?
Precisely. So we're dedicating 80% of this conversation to the tectonic shifts happening right now in their FY25 and FY26 financials. We're mapping out their massive structural pivot toward overseas markets.
Yeah.
And maybe most importantly, we're going to dissect the underlying technology and supply chain dynamics that are actually driving the stock price forward.
Because the central narrative buried in these filings is just absolutely wild. I mean, if you're looking at your portfolio right now, you have to ask yourself, how does a traditional Japanese revolving sushi chain take crippling domestic cost pressures, add in global environmental crises, and somehow forge all of that friction into a record-breaking global growth engine?
It's the ultimate turnaround story. But to understand the mechanics of it, we have to look past the surface layer. Like, what is the true identity of FNLC?
Right, because if you pull their official corporate charter, on paper, they operate restaurants.
Sure, on paper. But if you analyze their capital allocation and their internal operational metrics, they are something entirely different.
Exactly.
In reality, FNLC is a hyper-lean, data-driven supply chain and real estate optimization engine. The plate of sushi is, it's just the physical manifestation of that data.
Yeah, the way I like to visualize it for retail investors is think of them less like a traditional restaurant and more like the Amazon fulfillment centers of seafood.
That's a great analogy.
Right. They are completely obsessed with maximizing inventory turnover per square foot. It's not just about selling a piece of salmon to you. It's about the underlying algorithm dictating how fast that salmon moves from the global cold chain through an automated kitchen, onto the floor, and out the door with mathematically zero waste.
And the crazy part is, arriving at this highly optimized state wasn't born out of luxury. It was born out of pure survival.
Oh, 100%.
If we look at the broader corporate backstory, the entire revolving sushi industry possessed a massive vulnerability, like a structural scar.
The physical conveyor belts themselves.
That is the core of it, yeah. Physical belts inherently create food waste because items circulate unpurchased until they degrade and they just have to be thrown away.
Plus, looking back just a few years, there were those highly publicized industry-wide scandals regarding hygiene.
Right, the customer interference videos.
Exactly, people messing with the food on the open physical lanes. It wasn't just a PR nightmare, it was an existential threat to the entire volume-based business model.
And here's where the engineering gets fascinating. Instead of just putting plastic domes over the plates or hiring more staff to watch the lanes, they took that operational scar and forged it into digital armor.
The Digiro system.
Yes, the digital Sushiro vision. They completely virtualized the kinetic experience.
I mean, they ripped the traditional system out entirely. Instead of a physical belt carrying plates past your table, imagine sitting down and facing a massive, ultra-wide digital touch display spanning the whole table.
Right.
It perfectly simulates a physical lane with these virtual plates floating by. When you tack one or order something specific, it's routed from the kitchen directly to your table via a dedicated, high-speed automated delivery lane.
The mechanical brilliance here is twofold. First, they eliminated the speculative food loss and the hygiene risk overnight.
Because the kitchen only makes exactly what is digitally ordered.
Exactly. And second, they turned a passive dining experience into an active, gamified ecosystem.
Yeah, if you're a parent sitting there with your kids, they don't just tolerate the screen. They are entirely engaged by it. It's a virtual world where you interact with the interface, play proprietary mini games based on your order volume. They
Mhm.
basically turned a standard Tuesday night dinner into an immersive entertainment event.
I do have to push back just a little on the pure optimism of this tech transition, though.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, does digitizing the experience risk alienating the core demographic? There is a substantial portion of the consumer base, particularly older generations, who go to these places specifically for the traditional analog experience of watching physical plates go by.
Hmm.
If you replace the soul of the brand with a giant iPad, do you risk hollowing out your customer base?
You know, it is a totally fair concern. And frankly, a lot of analysts probably worried about the exact same thing when the rollout was announced. But I think the Q2 financials completely neutralized that fear.
The volume is just too high to argue with.
Exactly. The demographic, they are aggressively capturing young families, Gen Z, digital natives. They are driving unprecedented volume. Consumers are heavily buying into this digitized ecosystem.
The data absolutely validates the strategy. Let's actually unpack the staggering numbers they just posted for the first half of FY26.
Yes, let's look at the numbers.
So this covers the six-month period from October 2025 to March 2026. Top-line revenue hit 254.1 billion yen. That is a 24.7% year-over-year increase.
Just a casual quarter trillion yen in 6 months.
It's massive. And the profit metrics are even more aggressive. Operating profit surged to 28.08 billion yen. That is a 43.7% jump year-over-year.
Wait, a 43.7% jump?
Yeah, to put the sheer pacing of this into perspective, in just 6 months, FNLC has already achieved 69.3% of their entire FY26 operating profit target.
Okay, which forces us to ask, how are they blowing past their own internal targets this aggressively? Like, what is the actual mechanism driving a 44% profit jump when inflation is supposedly crushing the entire restaurant sector?
To understand the why behind that surge, we have to map the underlying financial causal chain. Because underneath those massive aggregate numbers, there is a fierce geographic divergence happening on the balance sheet.
You mean between Japan and everywhere else?
Precisely. Domestically, here in Japan, FNLC is facing brutal headwinds. Utility costs for running these high-tech restaurants are spiking, labor wages are steadily climbing, and the massive depreciation costs from installing all those fancy Digiro screens is heavily dragging on domestic margins.
Right, you can literally trace the squeeze on the income statement. It costs significantly more to keep the lights on in Tokyo today than it did 3 years ago.
Exactly. For the first half of FY26, domestic operating profit only grew by a meager 2.7%, landing at just over 8 billion yen.
Okay, wait.
Yeah.
If the domestic engine is stalling at 2.7% growth, but the overall company profit is up nearly 44%, the thrust has to be coming from somewhere else. The international side isn't just a growth vector anymore. It must be completely carrying the core business at this point.
That is the defining pivot of this company right now. This domestic margin compression is being completely overwhelmed by a staggering 112.3% year-over-year explosion in overseas operating profit.
Wow, over 112%. Yeah.
For the first half of FY26, overseas operating profit reached 8.88 billion yen.
Which means, in absolute terms, their overseas operating profit just eclipsed their domestic operating profit.
The international side hustle has officially become the main profit driver.
And that is the aha moment for anyone analyzing this stock. So what does this mean for us? It means even while keeping the lights and the freezers on in Japan is getting increasingly expensive, their overseas engine is practically printing money to cover the spread.
And that specific geographic profit shift directly fuels the company's projected earnings per share. Their EPS is slated to hit a highly robust 211.91 yen for FY26. And more importantly, it sustains a return on equity, an ROE, of 22.7%.
Okay, for anyone listening who might not spend their weekends reading balance sheets, let's translate why that ROE is so vital.
Please do.
Return on equity basically tells you how hard management is working the money that shareholders have given them. So if you invest $100 into this company, that 22.7% ROE means they are generating nearly $23 of profit on that equity in a single year.
Which is astronomical for physical retail.
Right. In the software industry, maybe you see numbers like that. But in the capital-intensive restaurant sector, where you're constantly buying expensive physical things like real estate, commercial freezers, raw seafood, and giant interactive screens, maintaining an ROE north of 20% while simultaneously self-funding a global expansion, that is a masterclass in capital efficiency.
And understanding that financial reality, the brutal domestic squeeze versus the highly efficient overseas boom, it perfectly explains management's aggressive new capital policy. You don't fight a domestic headwind, you lean into the global tailwind.
So if they have a massive war chest to spend, the obvious question is where it's going to generate the highest return.
Well, for FY26, FNLC has budgeted a massive 36.4 billion yen in capex. And looking at the allocation, they're heavily skewing it toward international expansion, investing roughly 19.4 billion yen strictly into overseas facilities.
Which leads us into the execution phase of their strategy. We know they're throwing billions of yen at the global market, but, a lot of Japanese brands fail when they go abroad because they stubbornly enforce a rigid Tokyo operating model in markets that don't want it.
Right, they just copy-paste.
Exactly. Let's start with their biggest growth vector, though, the China market. How are they deploying that capital there?
The numbers coming out of Greater China are just phenomenal. And the real turning point was their dual store launch in Shanghai back in December 2025.
Oh, right, opening 2 flagship locations simultaneously.
Yeah, and it wasn't just a retail launch. It was a highly engineered digital marketing event.
How does a localized physical launch in Shanghai actually generate a massive return on investment, though?
By engineering a viral SNS halo effect,
Yeah.
the Shanghai launch was designed to generate massive social media buzz on platforms like Xiaohongshu and Douyin. They didn't just rely on traditional advertising.
Let me guess, it was the Digiro screens.
Exactly. The Digiro screens are highly visually appealing. Customers weren't just taking pictures of sushi, they were filming this futuristic, gamified dining experience and posting it online. The algorithms amplify this highly engaging visual content, which just cascaded brand awareness outward.
So they essentially crowdsourced their marketing to the local population. That localized digital hype in Shanghai actively accelerated demand and foot traffic into peripheral cities like Beijing and Chengdu.
Precisely. They are achieving record daily sales across multiple Chinese locations because they built an experience that the local digital ecosystem inherently wanted to share.
It's brilliant, but it's not just a volume play. If we look at their broader Asian dominance, what strikes me is the granular mechanics of their localization strategy. Like, look at their penetration into Indonesia. Adapting a seafood supply chain for a new country isn't just about translating the menu.
No, it requires fundamentally re-engineering the back-end logistics. To capture the massive Southeast Asian demographic, FNLC realized they had to adapt their entire supply chain to meet strict halal certification standards.
And to get halal certification, you can't just take pork off the menu. You have to audit the entire cold chain.
Right. Every supplier.
Every supplier, every sauce formulation, even every cleaning chemical used in the facility has to be vetted and certified.
It is a massive upfront operational hurdle. But because they put in that infrastructural work, they successfully opened 4 new stores there recently, bringing the total to 8. They are seeing incredible profit margins in Indonesia, specifically because they respected and adapted to the local dietary laws.
Creating a highly scalable blueprint for the rest of the Islamic world.
Exactly.
And then contrast that with Hong Kong, where they are bypassing traditional advertising and utilizing unique IP collaborations. They're turning the act of eating sushi into a pop culture event, integrating localized menu strategies and character collaborations that resonate deeply with Hong Kong consumers.
They treat every region as a unique cultural ecosystem, which is why it works. But while Asia is locked in, we have to look across the Pacific. The United States has historically been a graveyard for volume-based Japanese restaurant chains.
Oh, absolutely. The macro environment there is incredibly hostile to the traditional conveyor belt model.
Right, because the traditional model requires massive floor space and relatively cheap labor to maintain the necessary volume.
And in the U.S., commercial real estate is exorbitant. And labor costs, especially with shifting trade protectionism, potential tariff impacts, union volatility, all of that will usually eat a low-margin volume business alive.
Which is exactly why FNLC is preemptively bypassing the standard model in North America. The U.S. footprint is small, but strategically vital. Instead of trying to force a volume-based conveyor belt into an expensive market, they are focusing their capital on a concept called sakabayashi in Boston.
Ah, the sushi izakaya concept.
Correct. Sakabayashi shrinks the physical footprint and pivots to a premium dining format. By focusing on higher quality, higher priced plates and integrating premium alcohol sales, the izakaya model, they fundamentally fix the unit economics.
That makes total sense.
They're continuously renewing the spatial design and integrating heavily with local Boston media and large-scale events.
The margins on a premium izakaya format are vastly superior and much more resilient against U.S. labor inflation. It proves FNLC has extreme brand adaptability. I mean, they can pivot their highly optimized back-end supply chain to serve a premium Western demographic just as easily as a volume-driven Asian demographic.
So we have this beautifully orchestrated global symphony: viral digital marketing in China, deep supply chain halal adaptation in Indonesia, cultural IP strategy in Hong Kong, and premium izakaya pivots in Boston. On paper, the execution looks invincible.
But as an investor analyzing this stack of research, you always have to ask the "so what" question regarding long-term viability, right? What is the ultimate existential threat to this global empire, the external catalyst that could bring the whole thing down?
Well, it's not a competitor. It's not even global inflation or geopolitical tariffs. If you want to know the ultimate risk to FNLC, you have to look at the oceans.
The oceans.
Yeah. The defining friction point of the next decade isn't real estate. It is rising global sea temperatures and the impending collapse of natural marine resources.
Wow, yeah, it is the ultimate bottleneck. You can build the greatest predictive algorithm and automated supply chain in the world, but if there are no wild fish left in the ocean to put into the cold chain, you just do not have a business.
And management is acutely aware of this environmental reality. They aren't waiting for the crisis to hit. They are preemptively building a massive economic moat to protect themselves from that raw material scarcity.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that moat because it sounds a bit like science fiction.
Well, look at the documentation surrounding their showcase at the 2025 Osaka Kansai Expo. They built what they explicitly called a future store, designed around the anticipated environmental realities of the year 2050.
Okay.
This operational store ran on 100% farmed fish. Furthermore, they integrated entirely plant-based sushi options and completely eliminated pork and lard from the menus to prove extreme global and environmental adaptability.
Wait, 100% farmed?
Yes, they are actively funding seed development and advanced aquaculture research right now. The goal is that when the natural catch eventually fails, their supply chain doesn't even blink.
Okay, I hear you. And from a pure corporate sustainability standpoint, it is a beautiful, highly responsible vision. But I have to push back heavily here. We are talking about food. FNLC's entire corporate promise, their literal brand slogan is, "Wow W, the world with yummy."
Right, that is the core metric of customer satisfaction.
So if you strip away natural, wild-caught seafood entirely, if everything moving down that automated lane becomes heavily engineered, farmed, or plant-based, can they actually maintain that promise?
It's a risk.
At what point does a hyper-sustainable farmed supply chain become a massive margin liability simply because consumers reject the taste? If it doesn't taste like real wild-caught tuna, people won't pay for it no matter how engaging your Digiro screens are.
It is a completely valid concern. Taste is the ultimate arbiter in the food service industry. But FNLC's approach to aquaculture isn't about creating a cheap, passable substitute. They are applying that exact same data-driven optimization engine to the biological breeding and farming process itself.
Really? How so?
They are working closely with aquaculture partners to micromanage the environment. By manipulating feed composition, water temperature, and current flow in controlled environments, they are attempting to mathematically match or even exceed the specific fat content and flavor profiles of wild catches.
That's insane.
It's a massive R&D race.
Yeah.
If they can solve the flavor equation with fully controlled farmed fish, they don't just secure their own supply chain. They essentially monopolize the future of affordable, high-quality sushi.
That is a massive paradigm shift. They are moving from just serving the food to engineering the biological reality of the food itself.
Exactly. It's a complete vertical integration of the future food supply.
So if you are looking at your portfolio and analyzing FNLC, ticker 3563, you really have to stop looking at them as a traditional Japanese restaurant stock. They have fundamentally evolved.
Definitely.
They are a globally rotating, data-driven food tech platform. They took the operational scars of the past, the hygiene and waste issues of physical belts, and turned them into the digital armor of the Digiro system.
Right.
They are actively outgrowing their domestic roots, with overseas operating profit now entirely eclipsing Japan. And they are using that massive international cash flow to fortify their supply chain against the ultimate environmental bottlenecks of the future.
Which brings up one final unmentioned puzzle piece buried in their long-term strategic documents. Something for you to mull over as you analyze this company's trajectory.
Oh, I love a good thought experiment. What's the final piece?
FNLC has stated a long-term vision for the year 2035, aiming for over 1 trillion yen in global revenue. But as they perfect this Digiro virtual interface, and as they pioneer these entirely farmed fish, hyper-sustainable supply chains, Consider the possibility that their ultimate 2035 endgame isn't just opening more of their own physical restaurants.
Wait, you mean the technology itself becomes the product?
Consider this: what if their future primary revenue stream shifts away from selling plates of sushi to retail consumers and pivots to licensing out their proprietary restaurant operating systems, their gamified digital interfaces, and their sustainable aquaculture networks to other global hospitality brands?
Wow. Sushi as a service.
Exactly.
If you have the best fulfillment algorithm and the most secure, sustainable cold chain in the world, eventually you don't just use it yourself. You become the underlying infrastructure for the entire global hospitality industry.
It is the ultimate evolution of an optimization engine.
That is an incredible thought to end on. From a simple physical conveyor belt delivering plates of fish to a global algorithm delivering the future of the hospitality industry. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive on the Japan Stock Podcast. We hope this gave you a few new ways to look at the numbers, and we invite you to return for our next deep dive as we continue to uncover the real stories behind the data. Until next time.